My name is Stropek. If I would speak German, you would definitely immediately recognize that I'm from Austria. Today I'm going to speak English, so we will not have any language barriers between me and you. My topic for the next 60 minutes is LUIS, Language Understanding Intelligence Service. It's about natural language processing, and I have to give you a little bit more background information about myself so that you understand why I'm really excited about this service. Oh, you have probably read that one. Let's go right into the next one. Yeah. This is what I am. I'm no data scientist. I'm a developer. I'm a DevOps guy, if you want. I'm in this business for nearly 25 years. I grew up programming C, C++, I learned .NET, I do a lot of JavaScript development, web development, and so on. Over the years, I have done a lot of work with data. I did work more than 10 years in data warehousing. I've built small data warehouses, large data warehouses. I did a little bit of OLAP analysis, data analysis, things like that. Today, I'm mostly focusing on cloud computing, but overall, I am a passionate software developer. I love to write code. This is what I do for a living. I know how to deal with data, of course. I know how to store data. I know how to retrieve it. I know how to transform it. But I don't have very strong machine learning skills. And I'm definitely not a statistic expert or a mathematician. That's not who I am. The typical applications that I built looked somewhere like this many years ago. Then they looked like that. Or today I'm building a lot of web applications. But for me as a developer, and I'm here a kind of stereotype for many developers out there, we of course get a lot of influence from out there because the consumer space is really bringing in, it's really making new user interfaces very popular. For instance, voice-based user interfaces. Many people have a device like an Alexa device at home, and they get used to talking to a system instead of using menus and things like that. Of course, as a developer, I've read a lot of articles about deep learning and machine learning and things like that, but at the end of the day, I am lacking the machine learning skills in order to build a solution that could be compared to what an Alexa, a Microsoft Cortana, or a Google Assistant could do. It's not only the Alexas of this world who influence the requirements that my users are bringing towards me. More and more, they want to access even their enterprise systems based or from their mobile devices, like their smartphones, their tablets, and so on. And on their smartphones and tablets, again, it's very inconvenient to use a user interface that I am used to building. They want to interact with the device using, in many cases, voice. Another trend that I am seeing, even in the enterprise world today, is bots. More and more people get used to things like communicating via WhatsApp, Slack, Signal, and many other instant messengers. And so they take this new world of user interfaces and bring it to the enterprise world. This is where I do projects every single day. I work with small startups, with large startups. My area of specialty is software as a service solutions in the cloud. And now my end users, my business users are demanding functionality like that. And of course, in the mid or long-term future, I expect that even more elaborate new user interfaces will come into my area of work. Here, for instance, you see a picture of Microsoft's HoloLens. Okay, granted, not every business application I build today is running on HoloLens, although many people would like to have such a fancy UI with augmented reality, but it's still hard to build, so it's not a short-term issue, but these things are around the corner. They are definitely coming somewhere in the next years. As a developer who work in enterprise projects with limited resources, with limited budgets and limited time, it's really hard to tackle such things, such new user interfaces, if I want to build something like that from scratch. We simply do not have the resources to it. And what I definitely do not want to build is, again, something like this. We had this before, maybe you can remember. It wasn't a great success many years ago. It was a conversational user interface, but it was simply too stupid, so nobody liked it. It was not intelligent enough. So I want to avoid that. I want to avoid building something, let's say, too trivial into my business applications. I want to build a conversational user interface given the limitations that I have. And this is what I would like to show you, and this is what LUIS is essentially all about. So now you want to use that one. What is LUIS? LUIS is a part of Microsoft's cognitive services. And by the way, whenever you see such blue lines with an underscore below it, that's a link. You can download my slides. Let me quickly show you that. Otherwise, I would definitely forget about it. I created a bit.ly link, so if you want to have the slides and all the code samples and the LUIS model that I'm going to show you in the demos in the upcoming 60 minutes, just go to this bit.ly link. It will lead you to a GitHub repository. You will find all the material that you see here, including working hyperlinks. So if you want to dive into it, just feel free to download it. By the way, the entire material is open source, MIT licensed. Take it, redeliver it, change it, do whatever you want with it. Okay, let's go back to the slides. What is this LUIS? LUIS is part of Microsoft's Cognitive Services Initiative. And the whole idea of cognitive services is to make machine learning feasible, doable, and reachable for everyday developers like I am. Well, I'm doing a lot of hardcore development stuff, but I work a lot in enterprises, and in enterprises, resources, time, and budgets are always restricted, and to be honest, the amount of really fundamental machine learning, deep learning know-how in the average enterprise isn't really existent in the moment. They have, in some projects, they have some researchers, they can do things like that, but cognitive services wants to, as Microsoft puts it, democratize machine learning. So if you want to draw it like this, you could say, Microsoft would like to solve common machine learning problems that can be considered some kind of commodity. And these machine learning models are then highly configurable. So you get ready-made services. One service that I'm going to show you is sentiment analysis. You cannot configure it. You give it a sentence and you get back the sentiment. Is it a positive statement or a negative statement? That's it, full stop, nothing to configure. Just send a sentence into it and you will get back this information. But many of the cognitive services are highly configurable, but you do not need to invent them from scratch. They are affordable, so they come with, and what do I mean with affordable? I think I have to define that. Affordable does not only mean that you do not have to pay vast amounts of money to send just a few requests to it. It starts with a free plan, and of course, if you send more and more requests to these services, then you have to pay a little amount of money for every single request. So it scales quite nicely. But not only that, it is affordable because they are really simple to use. They have a simple REST API. The configuration is rather trivial, let's put it that way. So it is affordable and it can be used by everybody, not only by machine learning specialists. And last but not least, and that's important for my area of work, it is business ready, it is enterprise ready. You get SLAs, service level agreements. You get guaranteed lifetimes. You get versioned APIs, which do not change every single day. And important for us here in Europe, it is GDPR compliant, it is globally available, it is available here in Europe. So these are the properties of the cognitive services, and if you want to put it on a chart where you see the development effort on the x-axis and the versatility and the control you have on the y-axis, then you can say that cognitive services are on the lower left level. So on the one hand side, you are limited to a certain degree what you can do with cognitive services. As you can see with LUIS, you cannot pass the Turing test. It will simply not work. This is not what it has been built for. However, the amount of money and resources you have to put in order to get something out from a business and enterprise perspective is rather low, and therefore it becomes affordable. That's the whole strategy, that's the whole story of cognitive services. So cognitive services consist of many areas of services that Microsoft provides that you can use. It starts with the Vision API on the left-hand side. This is, for instance, face recognition, emotion recognition, feeling recognition, detecting faces, telling properties of these faces, estimating the age, detecting whether the person is smiling or not, and many other things. Speech. Speech means that you send in audio and you get back a transcript. Again, configurable, so you can train the system with your own audio recordings, for instance, with typical background noises, so the system adapts to your needs. But at the end of the day, it's not a general system for deep learning or machine learning, it's specialized for speech. Language. This is the area that we will talk about in the remaining time of this session. Language is therefore processing natural language. You have multiple services, and we are going to talk about the Lewis service. And then you have the knowledge, the search area, where you can learn from data from the web. You can build, let's say, customized search engines, Bing-like search engines for your own portal, for your own data and things like that. These things are rather highly configurable, but they have a very clear focus. And on the very right-hand side, you see labs. Microsoft is publishing new cognitive services. First in their labs area, you can try them, but you do not get service level agreements in that area. So now let's dive right into the language area and let's see how this works. First and foremost, Lewis, language understanding, as I am talking about it here, is not a general intelligence for doing a nice conversation, a nice chat over coffee with you. That's not the goal of the Lewis system. It's just a new user interface, a component for building a new user interface over your existing, maybe business applications. If I think back, let's say 10 or 15 years, what I bought from the market is, for instance, ready-made user interface controls. I bought a control that made it simpler for me to implement navigation patterns in my application. I did not reinvent the ribbon that got popular with the Microsoft Office suite, for instance. Now, see Lewis as a kind of user interface element, component that you can build and configure with a very little amount of money, and therefore it's just another user interface, but it doesn't contain any logic. It's the existing logic, or maybe a logic that you are currently implementing that you want to make approachable by a natural language. This is what Lewis is all about. Lewis performs at its heart two important tasks. The first one is intent recognition. Give it a piece of text, a so-called utterance. Give it a piece of text, or of course you can combine cognitive services, so give it just an audio file, it will transcript it into text, and then it takes this text and tries to find out what is the intention of the user. I want to navigate to Sheraton Hotel. The intent is navigation. I would like to open the feedback form. The intent is open the feedback form. You get the idea. The next thing is entity extraction. If the user said in his statement, in its utterance, certain data, for instance, then these entities are extracted. I would like to know when flight number XYZ will leave the airport Frankfurt am Main. Then we have two entities here. On the one hand side, we have a flight number, and we have an airport name, Frankfurt am Main. These are entities. So at the very heart of Lewis, this is what it does. You give it a text, and it tells you what is the intent and what is the data, the parameters, the so-called entities. Of course, you can combine these cognitive services with other cognitive services. One example is, and I mention it here, sentiment analysis. You could say, give me also the sentiment of the statement, and I will show you an example later how you could use it. If you didn't understand the user, for instance, if he said something which you do not have logic for, but the system tells you that his statement was very, very negative, you might process this unrecognized sentence in a different way, for instance, handing it over to a human assistant, human support personnel, for instance. On the other hand, if the speaker said something neutral and you didn't understand it, it would probably be fine to just ask back and said, I'm sorry, I didn't understand you. Could you rephrase your utterance, for instance? What else could you combine? Language models in LUIS, you will see that in a second in the demo, are built with a certain language, German, English, Chinese, whatever. If you want to build a model that can be applied to multiple languages, of course you can use other cognitive services like the translation service to first translate the given text into a service language that your LUIS model understands, then try to derive the intent and translate your answer using, again, the cognitive services to translate into the target language of the user. It might not be the perfect discussion, the perfect dialogue for the end user, but at the end of the day, if the user is not capable of speaking a language that you built your model in, it's maybe a good enough compromise. Or, I mentioned it before, you could combine the LUIS model with the LUIS speech recognition and pass in an audio file which gets transcripted, then gets translated, then gets analyzed, and I think you get the point. At the end of the day, the LUIS system can be used for for many different applications. It could be in your enterprise portal a kind of search box where you intelligently understand what the user wants, and it could be an addition to navigate your system, for instance. That's one thing. On the other hand, the LUIS system can also drive the conversation of your bot with the end user. So you have a bot, you specify your intention, and LUIS does the heavy lifting of analyzing the given text, and then your bot, again, can analyze the intent and the entities and decide what to do next. I want to know about the flight. Oh, we do not have the entity flight number. My bot has to ask the user, okay, I understand you want to have information about the flight. What is the flight number? On the other hand, if the user said, I want to have information about flight XYZ, you do not have to ask back, okay, about what flight do you want to have information? Because that analysis has been done by LUIS, and therefore LUIS can drive the conversation, the dialogue of your bot. That's the whole idea. How does LUIS work? And I will show you a demo in a few minutes. Just give me one more slide, and then we'll do a lot of demo time. The LUIS model starts by creating, the LUIS process starts by creating a model. The model is a language model. You will see how that works in a second, and you can do that interactively using a portal. If you want to try it, please note that there is a global portal, LUIS.ai, which can be used from everywhere around the world. However, if you want to deploy your model in the European Union data centers of the Azure platform, then you have to use EU.LUIS.ai in order to work inside of the European Union, you know, GDPR and so on. On the other hand, if you want to build your own application and you do not want to use the existing UI, but you want to somehow automate or semi-automate model creation, model training, and so on, then you have a powerful REST API. At the end of the day, the REST API is used internally. So the UI that you see up here is just using the web API down there, so it really depends on what you want to have. As a developer, I love to have a REST API because then I can automate things, I can do the deployment automatically, I can do DevOps stuff automatically, I can do automated testing of my model, and so on and so on. Next thing, you train the model by providing examples. And that's not difficult. You just enter some sentences, combine it with some patterns and phrases, and it's really simple. Even if you do not have a strong machine learning background, you just enter examples here, and then you deploy that stuff to an HTTP endpoint. It's a real serverless service. So the whole idea is, do not deploy a VM, do not care about this Tamagotchi in the cloud that you have to update and patch and make sure that with a firewall that nobody is accessing it. It's just deploy, you have a staging environment, you have a production environment, you can compare staging and production, you have different versions, you have versioning, you can export this stuff so you can put it into source control, all the things that we as developers love and do in our everyday work. That's the idea here. The LUIS system provides a ready-made endpoint for it, and you just pay based on the number of requests per time unit that you want to pay. If you have only, let's say, I don't know, some 1,000 requests per month, you will probably pay nothing at all. That's perfectly fine for learning and experimenting and prototypes and things like that. And if you have multiple tens of thousands of requests per month, then you probably have to deploy to a paid endpoint. And then comes a very powerful thing. You're maintaining the model. The LUIS system is automatically gathering utterances that it got from end users and that it weren't very sure of. So phrases that it couldn't detect with a very high rating get presented to you in a separate part of the portal, and you can look it through and just mark them and say, okay, the user said this. LUIS, you didn't understand that. I tell you, this is that intent, for instance. And by labeling these things, you make your model better and better and better, and it's constantly learning. And the best practice with LUIS is that you start with a very limited model, just provide some obvious examples, and get it out as fast as possible and iterate very quickly. Maybe every day you take a look at the utterances, let your, let's say, trial users train the system, you label the examples, you adapt the model, you hit on a publish button. This is done fully automatically without any downtime. As I said, you have a staging environment and a production environment in order to be able to ask your testing users whether the user experience is now better, and then you just swap staging and production and everything is fine again. And then the whole process starts from scratch. You enhance your model, you give it more examples, you deploy the new version, and so on and so on. That's the whole idea. It's not that you start a project for LUIS that takes months and months. That's not the goal. The goal is to build a very specialized, small bot kind of experience. You get it out. You hope that users will like it. If they don't like it, it's probably because it's not intelligent enough. Well, you will get feedback, and you can make it better and better and better. It's demo time. Let's take a look at how LUIS works. First, I would like to show you how you build a model. Let's go to eu.luis.ai. And let me quickly open up my zooming tool so I can zoom in a little bit so everybody sees what I'm going to show. Let's create a new app. Let's say this is the MLConf demo, and this is the first thing that you might be interested in. If I zoom in a little bit here, then you will see that you can select the language that you want to use. And I encourage you to take a look at the LUIS documentation. Of course, the link to the documentation is in my slides. So you see which cultures are supported and which features LUIS support per culture. And I told you, if your language of choice is not in this list, you can combine LUIS with the translation service. In my case, I'm going to use English because I'm speaking English here at this conference, and then we can do some. This is a demo app. I can enter some description, hit OK. I've pre-built a conference concierge, and we will take a look at that one in a second. But first, I would like to give you some simple examples how LUIS looks like if you start from scratch. So, on the left-hand side, you see the two most important things you can do with LUIS. Here, you have the intents. You define intents like navigate, flight information, conference session information, get help, food feedback, things like that. Inside of the intent, you reference entities. Entities can be very simple entities where you just say, okay, this is a location, this is an address or whatever, but you can also build elaborate entities like, for instance, regular expressions. If you know your flight information always consists of 2 letters and then 3 digits, then you can tell LUIS that this is typically a flight information thing, and that will make LUIS understand it better, things like that. In the next area here, once you have deployed your model, this is the menu item where you can review the performance of LUIS. LUIS will tell you, hey, I got this text and I was not sure. Please give me feedback what this would have been if I was wrong or if it was okay. And with that, you train the system with real-world data. And then you have two other menu options, phrase lists and patterns. They are used to improve the performance of your modal, and I will show you later on what that looks like. Let's start by creating an intent. We could, for instance, say we want to have, I don't know, some flight information. This would be an intent. And then we specify utterances. I am looking for flight information. See? And that's it. That's how easy you create demo data. Give me information about a flight. Okay. I think you got the idea. That's the whole point here. Later on, I can train the model. Let's quickly go. I know that the model is too small currently, but I think it's important to see the whole process. You click on train. This is now training the machine learning model in the background. You click on test if you want, and then you can say, I look for flight information. And of course, in that case, it will probably work quite well because we only have one intent, and therefore it's not difficult to say, okay, this is with a scoring of 0.92, look for flight information. I think you got the point. Now, what are entities? I need info about flight LH1234, for instance. Okay. This one, LH1234, can now be an entity. So what I can do is I can go to entity and create a new entity. I could say this is a flight number, and a flight number is which entity type? Let me zoom in so that everybody sees what we are talking here now. We could just say simple. Then we do not provide any instances. We do not provide a regex. We just tell the system, hey, if I use this in an intent, it's just any kind of text, and I want you, Louis, to recognize that it should be a flight number, for instance. I can use advanced things like hierarchical, where I say I'm looking for, I don't know, a holiday package, which is an entity with this kind of star rating, and in that price range, for instance. This is a kind of hierarchical entity type. A composite type would be an entity type consisting of multiple things. I am looking, I don't know, a time, for instance, 1 p.m. We have a number, 1, and p.m. indicator whether it's morning or afternoon. We can specify a list of values, and this is again very important for me as an enterprise developer, because the list of values can be something which comes from your ERP systems. For instance, if I have a list of flights where I have informations about, I would probably not use simple, but I would prefer list, and I would build a kind of synchronization mechanism where I'm always feeding my master data into Louis, therefore Louis can reliably recognize flight numbers, for instance. An option to a list would be a regular expression. I could say the flight number consists of 2 letters and 3 digits, for instance, and then Louis again will quite reliably detect flight numbers, for instance. And patterns is something which we will cover later on. In my case, I'm going to start with a simple thing. I will show you other things later on. You see flight number, and if I go to intents and I go to flight information, I can click on here and I can tell the system, let's zoom in a little bit, that this here, did a zooming mistake? This here is now in reality an entity of type flight number. So LH1234, it's not part of the intent recognition, it's part of the entity extraction phase. So let's click on flight number. Exactly. Let's train the model. Let's go to test. I look for flight LH9876. Let's see if it works. And it tells me, not a good idea. Flight information is correct, but it didn't recognize the entity. I just provided too few utterances. I will show you a more elaborate model later where that really works. So let's help the system. I need info about flight LH9876, and now it should work. No predicted entities. That's not good. So let me quickly go to my concierge. You need at least between 10 and 20 utterances for an intent in order to let the system really work. Let me quickly show you an example that really works, where I prepared a lot of utterances and examples. This is just an example. I have feedback about feedback topic. This would be a more elaborate model, and you can find this model in GitHub. And now this can be easily demonstrated. I have feedback about, I don't know, sessions, for instance. And if I click here, I will see that now the feedback topic that you see here is an entity which was recognized from this sentence, from this utterance, and the rest was a top scoring intent of feedback with 0.99. And of course, you can take my model and try and play with it and check whether the recognition is good enough for your application. But let's go back to this very simple example, because it's easier in my experience to start from scratch and see how the model evolves. But I think you now got the idea what intents, utterances, and entities are. The phrase list, let's maybe go back to the intent thing and create a new intent. Let's say this is a flight number list. No, not an intent, sorry. I'm in the entities area. Flight number list. Just to show you what this thing is all about, let's go here, list. If I click on list, I do something different, because now I can provide values. I can say there is a flight number 001, and there is a flight number LH002, and so on. And I think you got the point. This list of normalized values can be provided using a REST API. So you can combine this list of value with your ERP application. I also created some examples here. For instance, food type. Food type is a list that I have created, and what you see in the food type list here is that you can provide a value and you can provide synonyms. In my case, drinks, soda, and sodas are synonyms. So what I can tell the system, I can give it a more domain-specific touch to my language model, because maybe in my domain, soda and drink means essentially the same. We are not talking about an elaborate conversational AI with which I can have a chat over different wine tastings. We just want to build an informational bot, a kind of conference assistant, let's say that. And it doesn't matter if the user says, I am looking for a drink, I am looking for a soda, or I am looking for drinks. I think you get the point. Okay? So this is what you can do with lists and synonyms, and with phrase lists you can do similar things. For instance, you can say that in your domain the words conference venue, conference hotel, venue, and conference center are synonyms. So the system does not have to make a difference. In your model, you just use any of these phrase lists, and the system will normalize this value to a common meaning, to a common phrase. That's the idea of the phrases here. Okay. Oops. Let's cancel that one. So this is what the list stuff is all about. Let me quickly show you an entity. That is a regular expression. This is like a regular expression. For instance, here I specified that in my conference concierge model, the rooms are numbered based on a regular expressions. We have the rooms A and then 2 digits, A08, A01, A02, B39. I think you get the point. That could be maybe a numbering scheme for rooms. And if I go to my intents and look for the next sessions, I can then specify that what's to see next in room, and room is the regular expression, and therefore it's very simple for Louis to recognize that in that case a certain phrase or what the user said is really a room number. That is what you can do with regular expressions in that area. Okay, so we have intents, we have entities, and last but not least, before we go on, we have roles. What can we do with the roles? Roles are a special thing which are connected to patterns here. And I have prepared an example where I can show you how roles look like. Let me show you a pattern here. I have defined a pattern, and to be very clear, patterns are really a pattern matching thing. So in that case, I know that users frequently say quite exactly sessions in room between, and this is what I mean with roles. In that case, we have one entity, session time. This could be 11 a.m., 3 p.m., something like this. But this entity is used in two different roles here because we have a begin and an end role. And by specifying two roles for the same entity together with a pattern, the system can not only tell me that it found two time values, 11 a.m. and 3 p.m., but it also extracts the role of, in this case, the time entity from the provided text sentence. Let me show you what I mean. If I go to test and say sessions in A01 between 9 a.m. and 3 p.m., if I do that one, I will see session. Yeah, and this is what I meant. Pattern matching is a special case. I could say I made this mistake now. I made this mistake intentionally, but I didn't. But it is a good thing that we talk about it, because you see, I'm missing the S here, and in that case, pattern matching is different from the machine learning part with intents. Pattern is really an exact pattern with which I can tell the system that certain patterns, as I'm saying it here, are really exact matches. So in many bots, for instance, your users have certain phrases that they use over and over and over again, and they want to have a very precise recognition of exactly these patterns, because they know if they say, I don't know, inventory of product number, they always want the inventory of product number, and no matter how you train your system, it has to recognize this pattern always. And this is what pattern matching is all about. So if I say sessions in room in A01 we had between 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. Now it's much better, because if I scroll down, you see that we have the recognition of the roles with the entities, session time, and now our application can react on that and can understand that it has to do a query to the conference program with a between clause, for instance. This is the whole idea of these roles in entities. Okay, now let me see if I have something else here. No, it looks good. I have provided, as I said, this example. But what if you need some common things that you do not want to invent from scratch? And this is also an interesting thing, because Microsoft invested quite a bit of time in providing so-called pre-built entities and pre-built domain entities. So if you happen to have to let the user enter, for instance, things like a temperature, a dimension, a monetary value, age, percentage, email, URL, phone number, key phrases, and so on, you do not have to invent that, for instance, with regular expressions on your own. But these are ready-made, pre-built entities that you can add to your model. In my case, I, for instance, used the date time pre-built entity in order to recognize 11 a.m. and 3 p.m. And what you get back, and that's the beauty of these things, is you get back a normalized value. The system does not only in the REST API give you back 11 a.m., but it really normalizes this value to a date plus 11 a.m. and so on and so on. The next what we can do is we can add so-called pre-built domain entities. So Microsoft created a bunch of domain entities. I'm just scrolling down so you understand that I don't have the time to show you all these things. So what they essentially do is they come up with pre-built entities for, let's say, commodity problems. Navigate between places, entering addresses, navigating in a shopping center, querying a calendar, querying an email system, things like that. For these very common scenarios that many people build, they come up with pre-built entities, and therefore we do not have to enter the specification of the entities and the example utterances for the intent recognition on our own. It's just there. We can edit from the pre-built domain entities. And all these steps of building these things are also available using the REST API. So if I go to intents and say add pre-built domain entities, you see if I, for instance, need in my bot the functionality to add a new calendar item, I do not have to think of the right utterances and entities. I just click on that, hit done, and it will automatically be added to my modal, and I can take it as a starting point and maybe change it, delete some things which are not relevant for me, or add some things which are special for my case. These are the pre-built domain entities. At the end of the day, you have at some point created your modal, and now we would like to work with this modal. You've already seen that you have this train button up there. Training is done, is part of the LUI system. You don't have to pay for the training here. This is done automatically in the background. The larger your modal grows, the longer the training takes, but typically it is just a matter of a few seconds and training is done. Then you have this test thing here where you can enter some test sentences, for instance, and it has some nice applications. For instance, if I would now leave these things here, and if I would change something in my modal and I would click train, it will automatically rerun all the utterances that are in this test pane and show me the new results of the LUI's modal. So this is, in my experience, very, very useful if I'm just testing the system and I'm adapting the modal based on some test data that I have prepared. Then I can change my modal and I immediately see the test results. Of course, you can automate this stuff. I'm a DevOps guy, so I like automating things, running tests in the background, in the night, things like that. For that, you have a batch testing panel. What you can do is, I have to zoom out a little bit because otherwise the screen resolution is too poor. I can import a data set here. Let me quickly click on the button and zoom in a little bit. Now I zoom in a little bit. This is essentially what you can specify here. You can prepare a JSON-based data set, in that case, some test texts with the expected intent and the expected entities. And then you can batch run this, for instance, with your new version of the modal, and you will get back a result in a graphical form and in tabular form, where LUIS tells you whether all your intents were met and whether all the entities were recognized correctly. That's the whole idea of this batch testing. Again, batch testing can be done through the REST API, for instance, to automate it during the night, or can be done interactively, as you have seen here in the test pane. This is the test area. Now, we have our modal, and we would like to use this modal. Therefore, we have to go to the publish area. First thing I would like to point out here is that with this modal, we have, as I mentioned before, two different slots. We have a production slot and we have a staging slot. It is not possible, and it's not the intent of LUIS to let you host this modal yourself on your servers or in your own VMs or somewhere. No, this is all provided as a serverless service. Serverless means you do not have to care for the service, you do not have to scale the service, you just pay just with electricity, you pay for what you really use. And therefore, you have the two slots here, and you can publish to one of these slots. For instance, I can go to staging, hit on publish, and you see now the system is published to West Europe, publishing is done, and I can now test these things. The other thing that I can use is I can automatically enable the combination with other cognitive services. For instance, sentiment analysis is just a checkbox here. If I specify sentiment analysis, I always, whenever I query LUIS, I always get back a sentiment value. Let me show you what I mean. For instance, if I go to single testing, I can say the dinner was excellent. If I do that, it automatically recognizes in my modal that it is a feedback intent. It recognizes that the quality was excellent and the feedback topic was dinner. So I can immediately store that, and in a bot scenario, I could respond with something like, oh, thank you, I understand that you liked dinner. However, if I say, I think the lunch tasted horrible, Okay, now in that case, and this was a prepared statement, I consciously not trained the system to understand that. In that case, we get the information that the system didn't really understand what I mean. However, if I go down to the sentiment analysis, this is what I have, okay, here. Come on. This is what I have prepared with the checkbox. Now, the cognitive services of sentiment analysis recognize that this is a very negative statement. The lower the value, the more negative the statement is. And if I get something like that, a non-recognition with a very negative statement, I could start a workflow, for instance, and asking a human being to read the text and maybe call the person and have a chat with the person why it thinks the dinner was that horrible. Could be a possible reaction. If the sentiment analysis is neutral or very good, you maybe don't want to do that, or you want to ask the user in a bot, sorry, I didn't understand you, do you want to talk with an operator or with a support person? This is the publish area with sentiment analysis. Speech priming, I think that's understandable. If you want to do speech recognition, you can combine LUIS with the cognitive services for speech recognition, and therefore these two things work together. I will not do a demo for that because otherwise I would run out of time. Blah blah blah. This is the next thing that I would definitely like to spend some time on. Resources and keys. If you take LUIS, for instance, then you get a key for deploying your model for different regions. If you use, let me zoom in a little bit, something like that. If you use eu.luis.ai, you can choose a European region, and then your data is sent to European data centers. And with that, you can, I say can because it depends on your application, it is not guaranteed, but you can become GDPR compliant. If you go to luis.ai, you have, of course, other regions that you can choose from. You get a test key with which you can, I don't know, somewhere at 10,000 requests in a month. I don't know it by heart, so you have to look it up in the documentation. If you want to have more, you have to buy additional keys. You have to buy additional price plans. And this is not done, many people are a little bit confused about that. This is not done using the LUIS portal, but on the contrary, what you have to do is you have to go to Azure. Azure is Microsoft's cloud computing platform, and typically, really typically, LUIS is always combined with some resources in Azure. For instance, the bot's code could run in Azure in some kind of serverless or platform as a service server farm, for instance. The data could maybe be stored in a SQL server or Cosmos database in Azure. So what Microsoft decided, they said, okay, we want to put the key management, the payment of LUIS inside of Azure. So you need an active Azure subscription if you want to have a paid-for price plan for LUIS. And how you can get such a key is very simple. You just click on Add, you type in, I'm looking for LUIS, and then you get a language understanding. This does not create an app for you, and this is often a reason for confusion, because many people think that you have to start from here to create a LUIS model. No, you create it from luis.ai, and here you are just creating the key. And the important thing is here is the pricing model. You see? You can define one free pricing tier. I already created the free pricing tier in my account, so this is no longer possible. I have to use the paid price, and let me quickly show you the current pricing. And you see 50 calls per second cost 1.26 euro per month. So this is the pricing point. It now depends on how many requests you send them. Maybe if you are a large airline provider and you expect many requests per second, then maybe it could be expensive because you need multiple keys and multiple deployments and so on. But in many applications, at least in the area that I work with, in many cases, I don't have to pay anything because I have a bunch of users and they use this service, I don't know, some dozen, some 100 times per day, and that's nearly for free. So yeah, that's the pricing point here. In my experience, in general, cognitive services for average business application is never a question of money. It's never a question of budget. Because if you want to build something like LUIS from scratch, using something like TensorFlow or something like that, the development effort would be so huge that you can spend so much money on this training and requests per second issue that it's not a thing. However, Microsoft is not making money of the small applications, they are making money of the big applications. They go for the rental car companies, the large B2C applications which have millions of customers, and of course they pay a substantial amount of money for such services, for instance image recognition, LUI, speech recognition, translation services, and so on and so on. You have to do the math, but the thing is, it's just like electricity. You know how many users you have, you know how many requests per second, and it's easy to calculate, it's easy to do the math. Okay, so this is how you get your keys. And at the end of the day, you just hit publish, and what you get is, I scroll down a little bit, a simple REST API. So essentially, if I would like to try this, I can copy this URL, copy the link address, paste it here in the query box up there, and please recognize that at the end we have this q equals, and that's the query string. So from me as a developer, it's trivial to consume this thing. So I can go at the end, let's say query here, and let's say I added a help intent where I can ask the system, what can you do for me? Which questions can I ask? And if I hit enter, I will get back a JSON, a very simple format which is easy to process from a programmer's perspective, and you see the top scoring intent. You also see the other intents down there with their scores, so you can again take a look at the scores and do whatever you want with it. And at the end we also see our sentiment analysis. This is based on the sentiment analysis, a rather positive statement. Okay, I would say it's neutral, but in that case it says it's a positive statement, so it's fine. So it's very simple to use. And in preparation for this session, I wanted to show you how simple it would be to add something like that into a line of business application. So what I essentially did is I created an Angular application. Angular is a very popular web development and mobile development framework. If you're not a developer, not an Angular developer, don't worry. We're not going to write code. I just want to demonstrate how simple it is to integrate LUIs. Essentially, it's just this line of code. What I did, I added the LUIs URI. This is exactly the URI that you saw on the portal. And at the end, I append the query that the user entered. And what I get back is exactly the JSON that you saw then. And believe me, if you're not from that field, this is absolutely clear to every developer. JSON is a no-brainer. Everybody knows how to handle JSON and how to format that in a nice way or display the result in any kind of way that you can imagine. And for instance here, if I go here, I added some sample sentences. For instance, I need help finding the conference venue. I click on search and you see it is a conference, it is a venue location intent without any entities. Let me look up something with entities. If I scroll down and say, for instance here, the coffee tastes great. Let's take a look at that. It's feedback, that's correct. And if I scroll down and zoom in a little bit, you will see that it recognized the food type is coffee and the quality is great with some start index and things like that. So now if I'm building a bot, I could now automatically recognize that it is feedback, that it's about coffee, that the quality is great, and I can answer with, oh, thank you, we are really glad that you like coffee, our coffee, or whatever we phrase our answer in a bot style of way. So this is the point. At the beginning I told you that I am a developer and I need something which is easy to approach and easy to integrate, and with this very small code demo I wanted to show you how it could be integrated in a simple line of business Angular web application, for instance. However, you can do more elaborate things. Microsoft has, and I have to go back to my slides, I've shown you all the, oops, what's happening now? Sorry, I pressed the wrong button. I stopped screen sharing and I will enable screen sharing immediately again. Yep, we're up and running again. I did all the demos here, so I can scroll down a little bit. Come on, scroll down. Dear PowerPoint, would you please wake up? Try it again. Yes, Now it has waken up again. LUIS works very well if you want to build bots. And of course, Microsoft knows that, and therefore they have created, let's say, a sister service of LUIS. It's the Bot Framework or Bot Builder SDK. Essentially, it's a service that can be easily integrated with LUIS, and on the other hand, takes away the heavy lifting from you to integrate with different conversational channels. Let me quickly go to this diagram in order to show you how this bot framework works and how it's related to LUIS, because I think this is an important takeaway, because in real world you will very frequently combine the bot builder with LUIS. What does that mean? Now let me draw a little bit on this code. On the right-hand side here, you see the different channels, the different conversation channels. You might want to build a bot, but you don't want to build a bot solely for Slack or for Facebook or for Telegram or for email or SMS. You want to build a bot that essentially works in multiple of these channels. If you build that from scratch, you have to deal with all the different SDKs, take a look at the SDKs, and implement the necessary code for each of these communication channels. The whole idea of the bot framework is that Microsoft provides a bot connector service, which again runs in the Azure cloud. And this bot connector service understands how to speak to the various conversational channels. This bot connector service then uses a very well-defined RESTful web API to talk to a bot that you provide. So you are using the bot builder SDK, it's like here, and at the end of the day, that's just a REST API that you provide. But this REST API answers to a specific communication protocol. So they are normalizing the API of different communication channels, so you don't have to implement a separate bot per channel. And inside of this bot code, they have ready-made classes, functions, and so on to access cognitive services. Here you see the cognitive services, and one area of cognitive services is, of course, LUIS. So let me show you a code sample. I've prepared a very, very simple bot. Where is it? Here is the Conference Concierge bot. You find the source code on GitHub, on the link that I provided at the very beginning. And here you see my bot. The bot is essentially, let me do it like that. It's, again, very simple code. I will zoom in a little bit in order to see it. What we get is we get back an activity. The activity is, in our case, a message that we can type in. And this message is then processed by something which is called a LUIS recognizer middleware. So it takes incoming messages from any bot channel that you saw on the right-hand side and sends them to LUIS. You do not have to do the necessary API calls and things like that. It's automatically sent to LUIS, and you will get back the result with a typed data structure. In that case, it's C#, but you can do the same in Python, in I don't know, Node.js, whatever you want to program. And then you can build, using the bot builder SDK, the elaborate or simple bot that you would like to build. I'm not going into the details of the bot builder here because this session focuses on LUIS, so I just wanted to show you how you can combine these things. How are they connected? If I go to the startup here, the only thing that I did is, let me zoom in again, I added a middleware, is it called, a LUIS recognizer middleware. I provided the necessary login data, some GUIDs which represent my app ID and things like that, and I specified the URL. In our case, we stay in Europe, and this is the only thing that I have to do so that the bot talks to LUIS. So at the end of this session, let me quickly try that. We will run our bot. Our bot technically is just a RESTful web API, so we are running a console app here. It's completely platform independent, it's completely open source, it runs on Mac, it runs on Linux, it runs on Windows. You can host it in your own data center, you can host it in the cloud, wherever you want. And then we have something that is called the here it is, the bot framework emulator. The bot framework emulator is a very simple tool that we can use to test new bots. And I can open my bot. I have prepared, of course, here it is, my bot. And let me quickly go to Visual Studio and set a breakpoint and set a breakpoint here, for instance. And if we go here and we say, I need help, for instance, in a few seconds, yep, we are here. And if I go in there and open that up, you will see, oops, can you read it? No, not really. Let me try it again. I will open it up and zoom in. Come on. Okay, I think you get the idea. Can you recognize it here? Help with the score and so on. The point that I want to make here is that it's really nicely integrated into this Bot Builder SDK. And this is something as a developer I really love because it's easy to handle. I know how to do ASP.NET programming. I know how to do Node programming. So building a bot with natural language processing is reduced to providing utterances, entities, and so on. And yeah, just adding a framework, a bunch of NPM packages or NuGet packages to a C# or Node.js project, and then I'm ready to build my bot, and I can import it in Slack, Facebook, email, Telegram, and so on and so on. So with that, time is out, and I have to present you my summary slide. The whole point of cognitive services, as I said, is not to build a new basic service and powerful machine learning platform. It's making common machine learning problems affordable for every developer and every business application. It is cross-platform. It works, I showed you a sample in Angular. It works therefore on mobile devices. It works with Bot Framework. Bot Framework is built on .NET Core. This means that it works on all platforms. The integration with Bot Builder, I showed you that one. And the integration with cognitive services, the whole idea of this stuff is to build a suite of services that work together, like sentiment analysis, image recognition, speech recognition, and so on. This is what machine learning with LUIS looks like, and I hope this last 60 minutes were interesting and you go and you leave with some additional insight. You now have a clear idea in your mind what LUIS is, and even more important, what LUIS isn't. And now you can decide whether you want to dive in deeper, and maybe you have applications, maybe you choose to go a different route. I hope it was a useful hour. I will present the link again if you're interested in the slides or the demos. And with that, I would like to say thank you and open it up for 1 or 2 questions if there are one. Thank you very much. Any questions that I can answer immediately? Yeah, here is it.
Did I get it right that LUIS is mainly for conversational apps? Or what other kinds of natural language processing is possible?
This service, LUIS, is for conversational apps. Yes, there are other services in the cognitive services product landscape that you can use to build other kinds of natural language processing stuff. I would encourage you to take a look at the website. It's linked in my slide deck, but you are very, very right. The LUIS system is for conversational apps. Yes. Last question? Yep.
Does it work well with German language?
Do they work well with German language? German is one of the very well supported languages. So give it a try. Does it work very well? For many domains, the domains that I typically work in, it works well enough. Again, it is for specific, simple tasks that you can automate together with a bot. It's not a general, I don't know, speech processing, language analysis, coffee chat bot. For that, it wouldn't be good enough. But German was in the first round of supported languages. It has been there for quite a while, and therefore it's quite robust and it works quite nicely. Thank you very much. I wish you a very nice machine learning conference. Enjoy the rest of the day.